Broken heart, imagine walking into a fancy restaurant with only $5 in your pocket, praying your blind date won't notice your empty wallet. Now picture a single dad CEO sitting just one table away, watching every move you make, and deciding to change your life forever. What happened that night will leave you speechless. Backhand index pointing. Right before we dive into this powerful story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss these heart-touching stories. Emily sat on the edge of her tiny bed in the small one-room apartment she called home, staring at the last $5 bill she had carefully tucked away in her wallet, her heart heavy yet determined as she prepared herself for what felt like the most important evening of her life, a blind date arranged by her friend who promised her that maybe, just maybe, this would be her chance at love or at least companionship that could lift her from the loneliness she had carried for so long. She didn't have the luxury of fancy dresses or expensive perfumes, so she chose her neatest floral blouse, ironed the creases from her old skirt, tied her hair back with the same ribbon she had worn since college, and smiled at her reflection even though her tired eyes revealed the countless nights spent worrying about bills, rent, and survival. But still she whispered to herself, "You can do this, Emily. Tonight might change everything." With a deep breath, she walked to the restaurant, her nerves sparking with each step, knowing the $5 in her wallet wasn't enough to cover a meal in such a place, but hoping the man she was supposed to meet would see beyond her circumstances, beyond her patched-up shoes and second-hand bag, and notice instead the kindness and strength she carried in her heart. When she entered the restaurant, the warmth of the lighting and the soft hum of conversations made her instantly feel out of place, yet she straightened her shoulders and asked for the table reserved under his name, her voice shaking but polite, and the waiter guided her to a corner where her date had already arrived, a sharply dressed man scrolling on his phone with a frown that deepened when he looked up and saw her. His eyes scanned her clothes, her simple demeanor, and though he forced a smile, Emily could feel the chill of judgment settle between them. She sat down, grateful for the chair that gave her a moment to steady her racing heart, and as she unfolded the menu, her palms grew clammy because every dish seemed to cost 3 or 4 times the money she had, and she already knew what she would say if asked. She would simply order a glass of water, maybe a small appetizer, and make an excuse about not being hungry. Across the room, at a table not far from hers, sat another man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a sharp suit that spoke of wealth and success, his young daughter seated beside him, swinging her legs playfully while clutching a teddy bear, and though Emily didn't notice him at first, he noticed her, the way she bit her lip nervously, the way her smile tried to hide her anxiety, and the way her date seemed uninterested, barely glancing at her as though she were invisible. Emily's voice trembled slightly when she finally ordered a small soup, pretending it was all she wanted, her $5 bill tucked tightly in her palm under the table, ready to pay for it so she wouldn't owe anything, but her date raised an eyebrow and ordered himself a lavish meal, several courses of steak and wine, without offering to include her, and she felt her heart sink even lower as the realization struck that he hadn't come here for her personality or her smile, but perhaps out of obligation or boredom. Still, Emily held her head high, nodding politely, answering his shallow questions with sincerity, though every word reminded her of the vast gap between them, and while she tried to focus on the conversation, she could feel eyes on her, the quiet, observant gaze of the single dad CEO at the other table who had been watching the scene unfold with growing curiosity and something else, something softer, almost protective. He noticed how she carefully placed her spoon down after each sip, savoring it as though it were a full meal, noticed how she kept her laughter gentle, controlled, as though afraid to take up too much space, and most of all, he noticed how her date leaned back arrogantly, checking his phone more than looking at her, dismissing her with every careless glance. Emily, however, kept shining despite it all, her resilience glowing through the cracks of her vulnerability, and though she didn't know it yet, her life was about to shift that very evening, because the CEO couldn't take his eyes off her, not out of desire, but out of a deep stirring within him that reminded him of the struggles his late wife once endured, the strength it took to smile when the world gave you so little. His daughter tugged his sleeve and whispered innocently, "Daddy, why does that lady look so sad even when she's smiling?" And his heart clenched because children saw truth adults tried to hide. Emily's date excused himself halfway through the meal to answer a call outside, leaving her alone at the table, staring at the candle flickering between them, and she blinked back tears that threatened to fall because she had hoped for kindness, for someone to see her, but instead she was reminded again of her place in the world. Alone, surviving, clinging to dignity with nothing but a $5 bill and a fragile dream. At that moment, the CEO's daughter smiled at her from across the room, waving her teddy bear, and Emily couldn't help but return the smile, her eyes softening, her heart lifting just a little because even the smallest gesture of kindness mattered. She didn't know that the CEO had already made a decision, that he was going to step into her story whether she welcomed it or not, because something about the way she carried herself with quiet courage made him want to know her, protect her, and perhaps even change her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. When Emily sat alone at the table, clutching the strap of her worn-out bag and staring at the half-empty bowl of soup, she told herself to stay strong, to not let the sting of disappointment ruin her courage, but the ache in her chest was undeniable, because deep down she had hoped this blind date would be different. Just then, the single dad CEO rose from his seat, his daughter skipping happily beside him, and Emily looked up in surprise as they stopped by her table. He spoke gently, introducing himself as Daniel, and with a kind smile he told her that he couldn't help but notice her bravery in the face of such disregard. Embarrassed, Emily lowered her gaze, insisting she was fine, but his daughter leaned forward and said with childlike honesty, "You look like a princess, even if you're sad." Those words melted something inside Emily, and for the first time that night, tears slipped free, not from pain but from the sudden warmth of being seen. Daniel placed a hand on the chair across from her and asked if they might join her, and though hesitant, Emily nodded, grateful for the company. As they shared light conversation, she learned he was a widower balancing business and fatherhood, and he learned that she had been struggling quietly to make ends meet while never losing her kindness. Instead of judgment, he offered respect. Instead of pity, he offered encouragement, and for the first time in years, Emily felt a flicker of hope that her story was not destined to remain one of hardship. When her date finally returned, smug and careless, Daniel's protective gaze made him falter, suddenly aware that someone of greater stature had noticed his treatment of her, and with a sharp excuse he left the restaurant altogether. Emily sat in stunned silence, unsure what this twist of fate meant, but Daniel only smiled warmly and told her that sometimes life places the right people at the right table, even when you least expect it. That night ended not with emptiness but with the possibility of a new beginning, and Emily realized her $5 had bought her more than soup, it had brought her face to face with someone who saw her worth. Backhand index pointing right, and that's how a poor girl with only $5 walked into a restaurant alone but walked out with hope, respect, and the chance at a new story. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories.